Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm going to review The Wake of Manadar by T.R. Pearce. Magister Jocasta Adaran is besieged in the city of Manadar, desperate enough to use some very dangerous magic. Thalia journeys to the front line with some huge magical war engines, trying one last gamble to win this war. Meanwhile, universes away, operative Amanda Devereaux reports for a procedure that will enhance her already potent AI-enhanced abilities. Their lives are about to collide, and neither of their worlds will be the same. I read The Wake of Manadar as part of my initial batch for the SPFBO Round 8, and just as a very side note that doesn't really have a lot to do with the review, the cover I received as part of this submission is quite different to the actual cover that's on Goodreads and Amazon. It's quite a bit more naked. It actually makes sense in the world. The scene is explained, but when I saw this, I had impressions about the book from the cover, and what I read was really quite different. And I know cover art can be a very subjective thing and quite a personal thing for the author, but I just don't feel we quite capture the tone and scope of the book from this cover art. It doesn't have a lot to do with the review, but I just wanted to mention in case someone had any impressions about the book from the cover art, perhaps in the same way that I did. So first of all, from the synopsis, this is described as a collision of science fiction and fantasy. And out of all the books I have read for the SPFBO so far, I mean, this is considering both batches, last year and this year, this is a collision of the two genres in the truest sense of the word. It acknowledges both genres and uses aspects of each one in a way that serves the plot at the time. It did seem to start veering into some quite hard science fiction technobabble at the start, but it mixes well and it smooths itself out and it works out just fine. One of the things about this book I did notice fairly early on is there are a lot of characters. We meet a lot of people throughout this one, and it is hard to keep some track. I did notice there are similar-ish names, people on different sides, they change sides, they change missions, they have different groups, there's all sorts of plotting and discussing going on, so there is quite the mix of characters contained within. However, they are really well created. I enjoyed meeting them throughout. And Amanda was a great character to follow. She is thrust into this world that she doesn't understand. It makes no sense. And her journey towards understanding where she is and how she fits into this new place was absolutely wonderful to read. She is cut off from the backup that she expects, and she has to figure out what the hell is going on. She is resourceful and brave and considers all the information she has about her situation. She feels very clear-headed and adaptable. Another aspect I really enjoyed about the characters in this was how organic and natural the relationships and trust and friendships changed and grew and built throughout this story. We have the space for people to get to know each other. We have space for people to realise that perhaps the impressions they had about someone or the information they had about someone was actually wrong, and their opinions change. Their perspective may have been wrong, and new levels of trust and friendship need to grow, and there is the space for this to happen throughout the book. Events move characters closer together and sometimes force them apart, and reactions and events all serve to have an impact on the characters and change relationships. And the emotions and reactions and outcomes all feel really well put together on the page. They don't feel out of place, they feel natural to the character, because not all of them will react in the same way, and what we know about each character at the time, their reactions make sense for who we have met. There is, however, quite a lot of info dumping throughout this book, and it does serve to break up the narrative. There is a lot of world to learn about, and sometimes it does work because Amanda needs to learn about this world, but sometimes, for example, we were meeting some new families and we got the history of the family. We got quite a lot of information before we got back to the plot of these are all the things you should know about what's going on with these people. Again, sometimes the physical descriptions got a little bit much. We got a lot about gun specs, and as someone who has no experience with any of that, it's just like, yeah, Done. Okay, thank you. One of the things though I did appreciate about this was the consideration for the different evolutions of the universes. You're not going to speak the same language, and that is actually accounted for in quite a clever way. I really enjoyed that aspect of the story and how it was solved. And that served to be a fascinating introduction to the magic system. So there is a pretty extensive magic system in this world, and it was really fascinating to learn about as Amanda went through and learned about it herself. That is how we pick up details of the magic system. The magic seems to be fairly universal in this world, but skill to use it is not. There are different levels of skill and ability, and it actually gets quite dark with how abilities are put upon people, and there's some questions about the consent of how people's lives are now forced into one direction with this magic system. It's really interesting to read about. And also one aspect about the magic system I enjoyed is consequences. I like a magic system to have consequences and side effects and not just a nice easy thing, and this one, yeah, again, it gets quite dark with the consequences and side effects, but definitely an interesting one. It does add a real sense of danger to use and overuse of magic. The overall flow of the story, aside from the info dumps, is pretty fast. The chapters can be quite short, and there were a lot of chapters throughout this book. I thought I'd made a note how many there are, but I did not. But the chapters really felt the pace moving along, and they were quite choppy at times, and it just kept you reading and reading and reading because the next chapter isn't too long, so why not find out what's just happened after this shocking revelation at the end of this chapter? Let's read another 5 chapters. Generally, the story is told from Amanda's perspective, although we do have some other loose perspectives who tell their part of the story as necessary for the reader to have the information about what is going on. This does, however, serve that sometimes the timeline can be a little bit backwards and forwards because we do see some events from different perspectives. So one perspective has told their account of the event and moved onwards, and then we have another perspective who goes back to that event and then moves forward on themselves. So there is just a little bit of choppiness with the timelines. There is a lot going on in this world, and at times it can feel a touch chaotic, but I really enjoyed my time in this world. There are more books in this series, and I'm really eager to see what Amanda gets up to next. So if you have read this, I would love to know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you all soon.